We continue now at the top of Daf Nun Amud Beis in Meseches Menachos. This is Menachos Daf 50b. On the previous Amud, the Gemara brought a brisa which implied that the only kind of ketoris that cannot be brought is if an individual brings the ketoris on the outer mizbeach, but other kinds of ketoris, other kinds of incense can be brought. But the Gemara now brings a brisa which implies, on the contrary, the only kind of ketoris that can be brought is the communal ketoris on the inner mizbeach. Otherwise, the other kinds of ketoris are not allowed. As the brisa now continues, Avol Tzibor Yehei Mevi. One might think the community can donate. They can bring a ketoris that's donated. Shemevi Chova Kayotzeba, because the tzibor does bring an obligation type of ketoris. Talmud Lomar Lo Salu. The pasuk says Lo Salu. That's not allowed. Yachol Lo Yalu Al Mizbeach HaPnimi. One might think they can't bring on the inner mizbeach. Avol Yalu Al Mizbeach HaChitzon. Maybe they could bring on the outer mizbeach. Talmud Lomar Es Shemen HaMishchav Es Ketoris Asamim LaKodesh Kechol Asher Tzivisicha Yasu, which the pasuk means Ein Loch Ela Masha. You can only bring the kind of ketoris that's mentioned in this parsha. Otherwise, all other kinds of ketoris are not allowed. And so how do we understand the first brisa that was brought on the previous Amud? And the Gemara now continues and explains that brisa as follows. Amar Rav Papa says, Lo mi boy kamar. The way to understand that brisa properly is it's lo mi boy. The brisa means to say not only this, but even this, meaning as follows. Lo mi boy tzibor al mizbeach hachitzon. We don't even need to say that the community on the outer mizbeach, that's not possible to lo eshkechon, because we don't find such a thing. V'lo mi boy yochad al mizbeach hapnimi, and we don't even need to say that an individual cannot bring on the inner mizbeach to lo eshkechon, because that we don't find such a thing as well. In other words, there's no example of it, and therefore it's obvious that that is not allowed. Even an individual on the outer mizbeach, the eshkechon b'nesim, there we actually do find one example, because in the times of the nesim, as the Gemara said on the previous summit, that was done as a horas shah. So maybe you would say that yochad al mizbeach hachitzon would be okay. That's all the brisa means. Horas shah haisen. Again, the brisa says no, that was a horas shah. It was just a ruling for that time period. It doesn't apply for all time. But really, all of these kinds of ketoris are not allowed. Only the ketoris that's brought again by the community on the inner mizbeach is what is allowed. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Chavise Kohen Gadol, the Korban Mincha of the Kohen Gadol. Rashi explains, Chavise Hainu Minchas Machavas Kohen Gadol. That's a Korban Mincha brought by the Kohen Gadol. It's a Minchas Machavas, is brought in a pan. Shemevi B'chol Yom, he brings it every day. K'dechsib B'tzav Esaron, like it says in Parshat Tzav. Machatzisa B'boker, he brings half of it in the morning and half of it in the evening. Al Shem Machavas Korulu Chavisim. It's because it's brought in a Machavas, that's why it's called Chavisim. Dechsiv Al Machavas B'Shem and Teyosa, it says that it's on machavas, it's on a pan, and it says bashemen, it's with oil. And so in any case, the Mishnah continues, Chavise Kohen Gadol, lo hayu boin chatzoin, they would not be brought in halves, elamevi isaron shalim, he has to bring the full isaron, v'chotzeu, and then divide it in half, and makrav mechsa baboker u'mechsa bein arbaim, and then he brings half of it in the morning, and half of it in the afternoon. Rashi explains, Lo hayu boyin chatzoin, they do not come in halves, meaning shelo yavi chatzi isaron baboker, he shouldn't bring a half isaron in the morning, mi besa from his house, v'chatzi isaron be'erev, and then bring another half isaron in the evening. V'yafal pi shekrevel chatzoin, even though when it's offered in halves. K'dechsiv machatzisa baboker machatzisa, mashma machatzisa shel shalema. It says machatzisa baboker, but machatzisa means it's half of a full one. Mechsa mitoch shalim hu mevi, he brings half of the whole one. Shemevi isaron shalim v'chotzeo. Again, the point is that he brings a full isaron and then he divides it in half. That's the meaning of the Mishnah. Lo hayu boyin chatzoin, again, elamevi isaron shalim v'chotzeo. He brings a full isaron and he divides it. Makriv mechsa baboker u'mechsa bein harboim. He brings half of it in the morning and half of it he brings in the afternoon. Kohen shemevi mechsa shacharis v'meis. Now let's say I have a Kohen and he brings half of it in the morning and then he dies. So now the other half is waiting around. What happens? Uminu Kohen achar tachtav. And let's say they appoint another Kohen before bein harbaim comes, before the afternoon comes. So lo yavi chatzi sarmi beis. So he can't bring a half isaron from his house. That he cannot do. V'chatzi isrono shel rishon. He can't bring the half isaron of the first one that's left over. Elamevi isaron shalim. Rather, what he has to do is he has to bring a full isaron, v'chotzeu, and divide it. And makriv mechsa, he brings half of it in the afternoon. Umechsa, the other half is going to be lost. And nimtzu, so it would come out that shnei chatzoin kraven, two of the halves are going to be offered, shnei chatzoin ovdin, and two of the halves are going to be lost. That half in the morning that was brought by the first Kohen Gadol is going to be lost, and now this half in the afternoon that was not brought will be lost as well. And the Gemara says, Tanu Rabban, and the sages taught in the Brisa, Ilu Namar Mincha Machatzis. If the pasuk said Mincha Machatzis, Hayisi Omer, then I would say, Maybe Chatzi Yisarn Mi Beis Shachar, so Makriv, that he brings a half Yisarn from his house in the morning and offers it, and Chatzi Yisarn Mi Beis Arvis Makriv, a half Yisarn from his house in the evening, and he offers it. Talmud Lomer Machatzisa Baboker, Machatzisa Ba'erev, it says in the pasuk Machatzisa Baboker, Umachatzisa Ba'erev, Mechsa Misholim Hu Makriv, he brings a half from the entire thing. Hakeitzad, how so? Maybe Yisarn Shalim V'chotzei, he brings a full Yisarn, and he divides it to Makriv Mechsa Baboker, Mechsa Bein Arboyim, and he brings half in the morning and half in the evening. Nitma Mechsa Shal Bein Arboyim, let's say the half of the afternoon, the half of the evening becomes tummy. Oh, Shabbat, or it's lost. So Yachol Yavi Chatzi Yisarn Mi Beiso Arvis V'Yakrav, one might think at that point he brings a half Yisarn from his house, and he offers that. Talmud Lomer Machatzisa Baboker, Machatzisa Bo'erev, the pasuk says half in the morning and half in the evening. Mechsa Mishalim Humevi, he has to bring a half from the whole. Hakeitzad, how so? Maybe Yisarn Shalim Mi Beiso, he brings a full Yisarn from his house. V'chotzei, when he divides it. Umakriv Mechsa, and he brings half. Umechsa of it, and half will be lost. Nimtzu Shnei Chatzoin Kraven, Ushnei Chatzoin Ovdin, it comes out that two of the halves are offered and two of the halves are lost. Kohen Gadol Shekra Mechsa Shachris V'Meis, and if a Kohen Gadol brings half in the morning and he dies, Uminu Acher Tachtav, and they appoint someone else in his stead, and that person is appointed before Bein Harboyim. Yachol Yavi Chatzi Yisarn Mi Beiso, Chatzi Yisrona Shal Rishon, one might think he brings the half Yisarn from his house, or he brings the half Yisarn of the first one. Talmud Lomer Machatzisa Bo'erev, it says again, half of it in the evening. Mechsa Mishalim Humevi, he brings a half from the whole, Umakriv, and he offers it. Hakeitzad, how so? What does he do? Maybe Yisaron Shalim V'chotzeu, again he brings the full Yisaron, and he divides it in half. Umakriv, and he offers it. Umechsa of it, and half will be lost. Again, Nimsu Shnei Chatzoin Ovdin, Ushnei Chatzoin Kraven. It comes out that two halves are going to be lost, and two halves will have been offered. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Tani Tana Kami de Rav Nachman. A Tana taught before Rav Nachman. That's an Amora who teaches Brises, taught the following Brise in front of Rav Nachman. Mechza Rishon u'Mechza Sheni. That half, that first half and that second half, what do you do with them? If they're lost, they're destroyed, but how are they destroyed? And the answer is to Ubar Tzu Rasan. They're left through Lina, they're left overnight, so they're disqualified through Lina. To Ubar Tzu Rasan means that they're left, that they should physically change, but it doesn't literally mean physically change, it just means left overnight, disqualified through Lina. V'yatzu lebeis hasreifa, and then they're taken out to the beis hasreifa where they are burned. Amar le Rav Nachman, so Rav Nachman said to the Tana, B'shlama rishon ichsi l'hakrav. Now I understand the first one, so that already was ready to be offered, and so you're going to have some kind of disqualification, and so you're going to turn it into nosar, you're going to disqualify it through Lina. Elasheni, but the second half that's brought in the afternoon, Lamalei ibor tzura, what's the reason why you have to disqualify through Lina, through leaving it overnight, through nosar? Meikara li'ibud kaasi. Already from the outset it was going to be destroyed. In other words, that was never going to be offered. The Kohen Gadol is now bringing in the afternoon and he's saron, and knowing that he's only going to be offering half, the other half is never ready to be offered. That the entire point is it should be destroyed immediately. And the Gemara continues, Damar Lachmani, now who says this to you? Tana Devei Rabba Baravuhu. It's the Tana of Devei Rabba Baravuhu. Diyamar Afilu Pigul Ton Ibor Tsura. This was the response to the question. In other words, Rav Nachman said, I don't understand, why is it that it needs Ibor Tsura? And he responded, the reason is because the Tana of this Braisa is Rabba Baravuhu, the Tana Devei Rabba Baravuhu. And Tana Devei Rabba Baravuhu holds that even Pigul, which is a full disqualification on a Doraisa level, but still, in order to destroy it, it requires Ibor Tsura, and so that is true over here as well. But the Gemara continues with another approach to this Braisa. Rav Ashi says, Afilu Teim Rabbanan, you could even say this Braisa is the Rabbanan. But Kevon Diva'inna de Palgi Behu, since at the moment that it's being divided, this fully Saron is being divided and half is being brought Ben Harbayim and the other half will be destroyed, but we don't know which half is going to be offered. Iboy Hai Makrav, if he wants he can offer this one. If he wants he offers that one. So therefore Michsa Chazu, so therefore really it is fit in theory to be offered, and that's why Ibor Tsura is required. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Itmar, it was stated the following machlokas amoraim chavise Kohen Gadol with regards to this mincha of the Kohen Gadol. Ketzad osan osan, how do they prepare it? Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Chia bar Abba says that Rabbi Yochanan says ofa v'achrakach metagna. First it's baked and then it's fried. Rabbi Asi Rabbi Chanina, Rabbi Asi says that Rabbi Chanina says metagna, it's fried first, v'achrakach ofa, and then it's baked. Amar Rav Chia bar Abba says, Kivase didi mistabre, makes sense what I am saying, meaning it makes sense to say that it's baked first, because tufine, the pasuk uses the word tufine, and that means to say, teofeno no, it should be baked in a nice manner, and therefore the idea is it should be baked first. That's a nice way of baking it. Rabbi Asi says, Kivasi didi mistabre, makes sense like me, because you understand the word as follows. Tufine means teofeno no. Teofeno no means to say that it should actually be fried first and then it should be baked, because no means that it should already be not fully raw, something in the process has started already, so the frying started the process and then it is baked. And the Gemara continues, Ketanoi, this is a machlokas tanoim, tufine, teofeno no. The first explanation in the Brisa is that tufine means that it should be baked when it's partially raw. Rebbe says, teofeno no, it should be baked nicely. And so here you see the same machlokas tanoim as the machlokas amoraim above. And the Brisa continues with a third Tana. Rabbi Yossi says, teofeno rabba, it should be baked rabba a lot. We'll see Rashi in a moment. But the Gemara comments, islay no v'islay no. He actually fulfills both the idea of na and the idea of noeh. And Rashi explains, again, in Rabbi Yossi, we should note that some have the gears over there, not of Rabbi Yossi, but rather of Rabbi Dosa. In any case, teofeno rabba afios harbe. The first explanation Rashi gives is many bakings. Ofe umetagna v'ofe. He bakes, then fries, then bakes. And according to that, islay na, so he holds of na, that it's partially raw. Mishum hachi ofa achartig, and that's why he bakes it after frying. At that point, again, it's not fully raw. V'islay na, but it's also a nice baking. Mishum hachi ofa tchila, that's why he bakes it first. That's a nice baking. That's the first explanation of Rashi. Lishnachrin, another explanation, rabba means gedola murukas. It means it's big and it's spread out, vidaka, and very thin. V'zehu noya, that's the beauty, the fact that it's thin and spread out. V'islay metagna tchila, but also it should be fried first. V'achar kachof, and then bake. V'ikotigo noah, v'noah ugadoli. So then you have the fact also that again it's only partially raw. You fulfill both. Lishnachrina, finally a third explanation. Teofeno rako. It's not teofeno rabba, but teofeno rako means soft. Shirakachena b'shem, and you make it soft with oil, harbi with a lot of oil. V'zehu noya, and that's the beauty. Tchila, that's the beauty at first. Metagna, that you do that frying. V'achar kachof, then bake it. V'iko noah v'noah. So now it's baked after it's fried. So that's noah as well. Rashi says, Shloshtan Shamati, I heard all three of these explanations. And the Gemara continues to Nan Hasam. We learned in a Mishnah over there. This is a Mishnah later on. Chavise Kohen Gadol, with regards to the Mincha, the Kohen Gadol, Lishasan, Varichasan, Vafiyasan, Bifnim. The kneading and the preparing and the baking is all done within. It means to say within the Azara. Vidochos es HaShabbos, and it's also Docha Shabbos. That melacha, so to speak, that work, it pushes off Shabbos. It can be done on Shabbos. The Gemara continues, Menahani Mili, from where do we know this, that it's Docha Shabbos? Amar Rav Huna says, Tufine, again the pasuk says Tufine, Teofena noah, means to say that it should be baked nicely. V'yafi lo meyasvel, now if you're going to bake it yesterday before Shabbos, so then already in shafallah, so then already it's not going to be nice. Literally, in shafallah means it's going to be puffed up, it's going to be stale, and therefore we understand that it's going to be docha Shabbos. The Gemara continues, Maskefla Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef asks on this, but why not prepare it before Shabbos and then you can bury it within yerek, within vegetable? Rashi says the chavish le'biyarka simply means tomnim b'yirakos. You bury it insulated in vegetable, kadesh lo yishlo baruach, so that the air won't affect it, so you'll be able to preserve it. And the Gemara continues, the very Shmuel Tana and the Yeshiva of Rabbi Shmuel, they taught, Teyasa, it says in the Pasuk, Teyasa, and that's really the source. Va'afilu b'Shabbos, Teyasa va'afilu b'Tumah. It means it should be done even on Shabbos, even in Tumah. Rashi explains, Teyasa al machavas b'Hashem and Teyasa, and again we learn out from the Pasuk. From that Pasuk we learn out even on Shabbos. And the Gemara continues, Abaya says, Amar Kra, the Pasuk says, Solas min chatamid, a different source, it says, Solas min chatamid, and Rashi here is from the coming Amud, Keminchas Tamidin, it's like the Minchas Tamidin, the Dochos Shabbos, that they are Dochos Shabbos. We will also note that Teyasa, we're learning from the word Teyasa, as opposed to Tasa, that's how we learn out again, V'afilu b'Shabbos, V'afilu b'Tumah, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video, on Daf Nun Aleph, Amud Aleph.